Welcome back, everyone, to Drunk Bible Study Bonus Edition. This was the beginning of Deutero Isaiah. Wow, we did kind of get into like a different feel, a different vibe from Isaiah. It was more recap, but also talking about like how cool God is as usual, and that he is a big green giant, or a big, just a big boy in general, because The Rock certainly is. So we talked about this idea of going to church. Take me to church, you two. Well, you're apparently going to take me to church.
Yes.
We will take you to church. So, Emily, am I correct? You've only ever been to like hippy-dippy Unitarian church services
No,
before?
I've also been to a Catholic church service.
Okay.
Like when I was really young. And that's where I got the whole, somebody goes and puts a wafer in your mouth and gives you some wine.
Uh-huh.
So did you,
and you're very stoic about it.
When you went to the Catholic Church, you didn't take communion though, did you?
No. Okay. I sat there and I was like, this is weird.
Well, because in the Catholic Church, they don't let you if you're not confirmed.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not.
It's just the honor system, but within the Catholic Church, you're not supposed to unless you've done confirmation.
I wasn't and I didn't. So no probs. No, I wasn't going to lie. Plus, I was quite young. I think I was like maybe 11 or 12. I don't know, maybe a little younger, but I was quite young, yeah.
Yeah.
This is the thing about, I've only been to a handful of Catholic services. They are efficient. It's like you're in there for like an hour, in and out, done and done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is actually something I wanted to talk to you about, Dedeker, because I feel like you had more of a consistent church-going experience growing up.
Yeah, you hopped around quite a bit, didn't you?
We moved a ton as I was growing up, and with each move, my parents would find a new church, and often in a different denomination too. So I not only did I not have a consistent one church, but also different denominations growing up. I mean, they were all still Protestant of various flavors, but it's like sometimes we were Methodist, sometimes we were Presbyterian, sometimes we went to a Lutheran church, sometimes it was a congregational church, all sorts of different things. So yeah, I was curious, Dedeker, how long were your church services growing up?
That was at least a 3-hour ordeal.
What?
Whoa!
At least from arrival to we're done with church, at least 3 hours.
But how long was the service part? Because you did a lot of socializing before and after.
Do you want me to do a full breakdown? I've written down what I did before this bonus episode. I sat down and just wrote out from memory everything I could remember about a typical day, a typical Sunday in like 10-year-old Dedeker's life.
Can I just ask you, any given Sunday, can I ask you how that experience was? Like how not the experience of going to church, but the experience of writing about going to church as 33-year-old Dedeker.
It was a little bit weird. I mean, because of course I carry all these snippets of memory around inside me at all times, but it was a little bit weird to just kind of lay it all out and really be trying to think in detail of what a typical Sunday would be, because it went to church so many times. And it's odd. It's an odd experience now to think about that.
Wow.
It's odd to think about. Most of my life growing up, I could only sleep in one day of the week.
Oof, yeah.
Saturday.
Not 2 days.
Rough.
Only one day.
Tell me about it.
I
Saturday?
know. Yeah, just on Saturday.
Me too.
Yeah.
I mean, not like when I was younger, but now, me too.
So I went to the Oroville Church of the Nazarene.
Cool.
Nazarenes, evangelical, Protestant kind of denomination. Okay, so here's how it would go down in my experience. If you're my family, show up an hour before the service even begins.
Gosh, okay, wow.
Wow.
Off to a great start.
This is a very Dedeker family thing to do. Like, we always used to joke that the family motto was hurry up and wait, because it's hurry up so we can get there an hour ahead of time, where we're just going to be waiting anyway.
Is anyone else there? Is anyone else there?
Yes.
Yeah?
Other people are there. Yes.
Okay.
Because they open the church at least an hour before the service actually begins, so people can show up.
Okay.
And when I wrote this out, I was like, I don't know why we actually showed up an hour before.
Seriously?
Was it to get good parking? I think it was just to get good parking.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Was it a big church with a big parking lot?
It was a big-ish church. I don't think it counted as a mega church. I think to count as a mega church, you need to have a Starbucks inside your church.
What?
And then it'll count as a
That's
mega
a thing?
church.
People have Starbucks?
That's a thing, Emily.
Funny.
That is
It's funny
a thing.
because to me, we only went to one mega church for a little while when I was growing up. And to me, the thing that classified it as a mega church was the fact that it had escalators inside.
Okay, we didn't have any escalators for sure.
That's also a lot. That's like a lot to process.
But to put it in
Wow.
perspective, the main sanctuary area, like the main seating area, that had a capacity of 1,000 people.
Okay, that's pretty
So-
good size.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty good size. I don't think we would necessarily get to a full 1,000 people, but definitely a good chunk, right? It was a large church for sure. So you show up an hour before to make sure you get good parking, and you wait for your best friend to arrive, and your best friend usually shows up 5 minutes after the service starts. So that's a little bit rough
You're like, "Thanks a
sometimes.
lot."
Yeah.
But in the meantime, there's some stuff to entertain yourself with. There's other kids that you're friends with who are there. There's the Candyman who's there,
The
who's just
Candyman?
an elderly. Yeah, the Candyman.
What does that mean?
He was just an elderly gentleman in the church who always handed out candy to small children. And he had
That's-
good candy though, not like old
Wow.
person candy, like good candy, like these truffles and stuff
Oh, wow.
that he would hand
Wow.
out. So all of us children would flock to the Candyman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I bet you did. Jeez.
So you keep yourself occupied in that way, kind of running around, getting up to no good in the hour before church starts. Then church is about to actually start. And you come into the sanctuary. Usually you sit at the same seats. It's kind of like a cafeteria. Everyone kind of gravitates to the same.
Really? You had regular seats?
We had
never
regular
did.
seats.
Interesting.
We never did.
Now those seats,
Huh.
those regular seats slightly shifted over the years, but generally, yeah, you had regular seats.
Okay.
Okay.
You never, because you were never really a regular, were you? Because you were shifting around all the time.
I mean, we would live in a place for a couple years.
Okay.
It wasn't like we moved every week or anything like that.
I don't
We
know.
were just going everywhere. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Maybe we did. I don't remember us having regular. I feel like we usually just kind of, our family would sort of shuffle in and sit toward the back.
Oh, you were one of
Okay.
those.
With the one
wow.
exception of when we were in, I want to say this is when we were living in North Carolina, when my dad was in the band for one of the churches that we went to. And
What
so
did he
then
play?
we would sit further up. He played the bass.
Oh, so it's a family thing.
It's
that
a
you
family
play
thing,
this
yeah.
well.
Playing
it.
bass and playing bass at churches specifically is a
Yes.
family
Got
thing,
it.
A
apparently.
Chase Lindgren
Got
family
it.
tradition.
All
So
makes
speaking of,
sense.
as you're coming in for the beginning of church, usually there's some kind of jam plan, like the worship band has started.
Okay, cool.
And
yeah.
they're starting to usually some kind of pump you up song, like a worship song that has claps in it.
Instrumental ones or with words?
With words. We're singing.
Oh wow!
We're singing.
Oh, you're singing as you're walking in.
Well,
What kind
I
of
mean,
songs
as people
are
are
you talking
settling,
about?
people are getting in their seats, and the
Okay,
worship leader
okay.
is starting.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of a specific song. I could only think of the claps because so much worship music is just like the same, right? It all blends together. So,
Okay.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
like some kind of
Just the claps.
upbeat. Just the claps. Some kind of upbeat clapping song to get people pumped to like be in church and worshiping and stuff like that.
Like, are we talking like "Shout to the Lord"?
Oh yeah, shout to the Lord for sure.
Or "Awesome God" maybe is another good one.
Awesome God's a little bit more downbeat.
Oh, really?
A little bit downbeat.
Oh, I feel like
You wouldn't start there. You would not
Okay,
start with
okay,
Awesome God.
okay.
You'd work
Sure,
your way
sure,
up to
sure.
Awesome God. So I'm sorry,
Awesome
Emily.
God.
Thank you for listening to all this.
I'm just like trying to compute like what
Okay,
is
here's
even
something else to
happening
know.
here.
So different churches have different systems for this. But our
Okay.
church had a big projection screen that came down, and they would project the lyrics
Yeah,
onto
Oh,
the screen.
totally.
So that's how
Okay.
you knew the lyrics to the song that you're singing.
Yeah.
hmm
Okay.
There was like a projection room in the back where like teenage boys would be recruited to run the projection, and then they got to just like hang out there and like not pay attention and get up to no
Yeah.
good.
That sounds,
like an
great.
awesome gig.
I
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
All of us kids were really jealous of whoever the teenage boys were that got to hang out in the projection room.
Yeah.
So you come in, you're getting pumped up. So we sing like a song or two. Everyone's like super jazzed to be at church. And then there's a period of like announcements.
Yep.
So you've been
What kind of
handed
announcements?
you've been handed a bulletin on the way in, almost like a program.
Yeah.
It's like this folded little leaflet, a couple pages, maybe. announcements of like, there's going to be a fundraiser this week, or we're starting a new women's class, so make sure you show up to that, or hey, come to the potluck at the end of the month, or we're doing signups for, like little churchy announcements.
Like community event kind of
community
things.
events,
yeah. Okay.
I found that to be a pretty universal part of any church service, with the one exception being the denominations that very much follow the
that hate community.
Well,
the what?
Yeah. There's some denominations that are a little more structured in their services than others. I'm thinking like the Catholic Church and the Lutheran Church and like the Anglican Church tend to have kind of a stricter order of what they do in a service. I still feel like there's a little room for announcements, though. That's pretty normal to have like the community announcements, right? It's like our youth group is raising money for their mission trip, and so be sure to sign up to volunteer to make cookies for their bake sale, or that kind of stuff.
Cute. Yeah. Okay.
In the bulletin, like there would be often information about all those things, all the announcements, often some bad poetry sometimes.
Oh really? In the announcements?
Yeah, no, in the bulletin. There was a woman.
In the bulletin.
There was a woman in our church who was just like
terrible at poetry.
So proud of her poetry, and it was just so.
Oh no!
Oh gosh,
that's sweet.
I don't know if it's sweet. It was like bad poetry, not even in the sense of like bad poetry that's trying to be artistic, but I mean bad poetry where it's like
it's just bad.
All couplets, like written by a second grader. That kind of poetry. So was a thing. So okay. Yeah. So we get through our announcements, and then we do more singing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Usually while standing. Usually it's like you got to stand to sing. We do the worship portion of
And now, was
program.
yours all contemporary music, or was it hymns, or what?
It was a mix. They tried to do a mix to keep everybody happy. It was a mix of contemporary worship music and some hymns. Sometimes there would be a choir. I think at our church the choir went through some seasons, I guess, of when choir was active or not. Sometimes I sang in choir when I got a little bit older. Sometimes there'd be some solos. You go through a mix of like upbeat worship songs to like the downbeat, like the serious worship songs.
The downbeat worship songs.
It's just like the slow dance at a prom.
Wow.
You gotta mix those things
really
in.
Something to think about there. Yeah. Okay.
And then at some point, once we're still in the worship a little bit, there's the children's church dismissal happened.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think you two have talked to me about this before. It's like GTFO, you kids who don't know anything.
Basically, yeah. Then it was like, okay, now it's time to dismiss all the little kids, usually 12 and under, I would say. I was going to children's church until I was about 12. So everyone leaves. All kids leave.
Okay.
Anyway, and go to children's church, which is usually run by like some dad. A fun dad. A fun dad.
Yeah, a fun dad.
Like a fun dad who can play guitar, runs children's church.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Ours was always run by, at some churches, it was like the older youth group. This was when I was in high school, when we also had sort of a separate church that we would go to at the bigger churches. Those were run by like cool dudes in their 20s generally.
Oh,
it was pretty cool.
Like exactly like what you wanted to become.
What I could have,
what I could have been. What you could have been.
Yeah,
totally.
But then when I was a kid, it was pretty much always like it was always a daughter of someone in the church who ran the children's church.
Interesting.
Or maybe like they always tended to be a little on the younger side. And it's hard for me to say because I was, 8 or whatever at the time. But I would guess looking back, they were also probably like maybe in their upper teens, maybe 20s.
Wow.
That makes sense, though, because back in that time, in the evangelical Christian church, technically women were allowed to become pastors, but really the only two acceptable positions were worship pastor or quote unquote children's pastor.
Of course.
Were really the only arenas that women went into as far as any church leadership. I'm sure that has maybe changed now in certain denominations, but I remember at the time, even I noticed that as a kid, that like, yeah, women can be pastors, but really we're only letting them deal with the music or the kids.
I think I was in college the first time I had a female pastor at a church.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely. Like that's something that's changed. And then I'd been to a bunch of churches after that had women pastors. But yeah, you're right. Growing up, it was pretty much always men, and there'd usually be the woman who would do the announcements, like you said.
Yeah,
at the
women usually do the
beginning.
announcements. There's usually some nice lady who organizes the potlucks.
You got to give them something so that they feel included.
Well, you gotta give them the women's work, right? A potluck.
Yeah.
What man is going to organize a potluck? Come on.
No, not a single man.
Not a single man is going to organize a potluck. It has to be a woman, okay?
Definitely.
Okay, so children's church dismissal happens. And so up until the age of 12, I would go skipping along.
Oh, but then after
these
12.
huge double doors. But then after 12.
That always was the age when I was a really young person. I was like, I'm going to be really grown up at 12.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
I know. My niece just turned 12 and I'm getting those vibes also.
Oh my gosh. She's like, I am so grown up at 12.
Like, I'm an adult now.
Exactly.
However, like past the age of 12, then you're kind of expected to hang out during the next portion, which is the sermon.
Which sucks. Like, that's
which
the worst.
is like 300 hours long to a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Now, did you do readings before the sermon, or you just went straight to sermon?
What do you mean by readings?
Like scripture readings.
What do you mean by scripture readings?
I mean, reading the Bible, reading scripture.
Like someone reading
loud.
it to you, or us all reading it together?
Yes. Someone reading it to you.
That was usually baked into
loud.
the sermon.
Oh, really?
I think.
Interesting.
Now I'm doubting myself.
Huh.
Because it does vary by denomination, but a lot of the denominations that I've gone to would generally do 2 or 3 readings that would all happen before the sermon. So then the sermon kind of referenced those and talked about those.
Maybe.
And again, that would be like guest readers that would read that, people from the congregation.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Really? It was usually like 2 from the Old Testament and 1 from the New Testament.
Huh.
Really? You see, you didn't? Okay. Yeah.
No.
That makes sense from what you've told me of your church.
The lectionary?
Before.
I don't think our church had a lectionary.
Yeah, so denominations that follow, like that truly follow the lectionary are really only the Catholics and Lutherans and Congregational Church and maybe one other church. But a lot of churches still might use it. But generally, there were still always readings. At least one Old Testament, one New Testament that kind of inspired what the sermon was about.
Interesting. So, okay, with the sermon, so remember that bulletin that you got handed right when you were heading in to church?
No.
Okay, the bulletin that had the announcements and the bad poetry.
I recall you talking about it, but I don't remember actually ever having it.
Yes, well, you got to come along with me on this journey, Emily.
Okay, I'm there. I'm there with you.
You need to use your imagination.
It's a fun time.
We're together. We're 12. We're in church.
We're so awesome.
I brought you along. You're like my little friend that I've brought to church for that Sunday.
Little friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it. Okay.
So. Now, what I guess was cool, in the bulletin is that usually there would be some notes that kind of, some bullet points that corresponded to the sermon, but often it was like fill in the blanks. It was supposed to be almost like a little study guide where you listen to the sermon and you had to like fill out the blanks.
Really? Was this for everyone or just for the
to make sure that you were paying it? This is for everybody. No, this is for everybody.
Wow. Really?
I think they stopped doing it in later years. And none of the adults really used it. Sometimes they did. But when you're a kid, like trying to pay attention, sometimes it was...
It's the worst. Yeah.
Oh, it was the worst, though. In our church, on the back of every seat, there was a little envelope for doing the offering where you could put your money in. And we would usually tear those envelopes apart and use those to like scribble on or doodle on if you had cool parents who weren't very authoritarian about you paying attention.
Okay.
But if you had my parents,
oh god, yeah, I was gonna ask. I was like, what did Mama Dedeker do?
Oh, we had to sit there quietly and pay attention, and it was the worst.
Yeah, that sounds rough.
Couldn't draw, couldn't read other books. Like, it was the worst. Now, in the meantime, on the walls.
I mean, to be fair, we could not read other books or do other things too. We were able to draw because it's like, you're doodling while you're listening, which would end up turning into passing notes.
Yeah, we couldn't pass notes.
That's awesome, though.
Let me tell you, though.
Couldn't bring a book or a Game Boy or something.
Oh my God, that would have been so awesome.
With my 2 closest friends that I grew up with in church, our families very intentionally sat us on opposite sides of the sanctuary, but we still learned over the years how to like catch each other's eye from like 60 feet away. And how to yes, we did exactly what Emily's doing. We created hand signals where we would like judge the quality of the choir performance and things like that.
That soprano was super flat. Yikes.
Yes. Oh yeah. Lots of that. Now in the meantime, our church had a nursery in it also, like a place where you go to drop off your babies, like your babies, like too baby to go to children's church, so probably under the age of 5 or so. And there were these big, like what did you call them? Like LCD screens that would flash a number. Like you basically, as far as I understand it, you would drop off your baby, they would give you a number, and then if your baby was having like a total meltdown and needed mom,
so like, please come get your baby.
They would flash that number of like 67, you gotta get to the nursery stat.
I've been to some churches that did that move.
That's amazing. They can't even handle the freaking baby.
Well,
like they're not gonna. Well, I don't know.
Okay, because
like,
in my church nursery, listen, in my church nursery, it was like 2 teenagers and one.
Okay, well that makes sense.
Lesbian,
yeah, exactly,
who was
that
running the whole
sense.
show, and so between a lesbian and 2 teenagers, like they can only handle so many babies.
Okay, fine, that makes sense. Like,
so.
But obviously, if you're like leaving your baby at daycare, they're not gonna like flash your number on a giant like thing in the sky saying like you're at work, but number 69 needs to get the F over here and get your freaking baby.
I don't know how it worked. I never was on the receiving end of that. So
truly amazing. Okay.
So you do the sermon. Maybe you do communion. Now, this is the thing that Jace and I have discussed, where Jace always went to churches where they did communion every single service.
Not
wait
always.
Wait a minute. I thought that was just a Catholic thing. Apparently, I was dead wrong.
Oh, no. The Protestants love communion also.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, wait, you thought that communion as a whole was Catholic, or that doing it every week was Catholic,
Both.
Doing it at all?
Yeah, doing it at all.
Oh, wow. Oh, no, man.
No,
all of us do it. Yeah. We love it.
Okay. Like,
love it.
Eat that Christ. Eat him.
We would only do it on maybe a quarterly basis, though. We wouldn't do communion every single week.
Different churches that I went to did it with different frequency. Some did it every week. Some it was, I don't know what the cadence was, but yeah, some it was not every week.
Okay.
And we didn't have wafers. We had like little tiny squares.
Squares of Jesus?
I wouldn't even call it
like,
bread. I'd call it like glue that's kind of in a bread form, in a cracker form.
Okay, Emily, to try to paint a picture, do you remember remember how if you took white bread, especially as a kid ever, and like smooshed it up into like a tiny little pellet? Have you ever done that? Like you take a piece of bread, take the crust off, and you like squish it down really small?
Not really.
So imagine you did that, but then you just like left it out for a couple of days so it gets dry.
And then you ate it.
And then you ate it.
That sounds simply revolting. I'm sorry, but like I'm just gonna say that that's nothing good about that.
In my church, we would get like, so you'd pass around the quote unquote bread. That was just those little pellets.
Whatever it was.
It was.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then they'd pass around the quote unquote wine, which in our church wasn't wine, it was grape juice. And
so you didn't even get to
I didn't even get to get a tiny buzz in church at all.
Dang, too bad.
The tiniest buzz.
They would hand out these
buzz.
They would pour grape juice into these little plastic like shot glasses, essentially.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That you would have your tiny little pellet of bread and your tiny little shot glass of grape juice. And then you knock that back. And then if you're me and my friends, then you like immediately take that shot glass and like stick them in your eyeballs. Because at that point you're so freaking bored that
of course you're like,
just,
give me
desperate
get
for
me
any
out of
kind
here, damn it. Yeah.
And you get in
Love
trouble
it.
for doing that.
Of course.
And then at some point offering has also been passed around.
Okay.
In my church it wasn't a plate that got passed, it was like a velvet bag with 2 handles on each side.
Mm-hmm.
So you pass that around.
Yeah.
And sometimes mom puts a surprising amount of money in there, and sometimes she puts a small amount of money.
Wow.
That's, as a kid, when you're trying to figure out how money works, you're just like, I don't know. I'm confused about
Wow.
how this works.
Yeah, no, it was an interesting thing. I was just going to say, with the whole communion thing, to me, that was something that was so weird to me growing up, going to different churches, was how different communion was. Because some of the churches we went to, it was the little pellets with the grape juice.
I've only seen the wafers ever.
Yeah.
So I've actually never regularly attended a church that did wafers, except for the brief stint in high school when I was hired to be a singer in the choir at a Lutheran church.
I've only seen wafers at like Catholic and Catholic adjacent.
Yeah, that's
churches.
why I saw it at the Catholic church.
Yeah,
I think they must.
It's
They
like
must.
Catholic
They
and
must have
Lutheran,
like an exclusive account with the wafer
Yeah,
makers.
they're like, we're getting all the wafes.
I think
Good
so.
luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But most of the churches I went to is either the little pellets, or I went to some churches where it was actually just like ripped up pieces of bread.
Yeah, which
like,
is so luxurious to me.
I know, it was nice. When I went
it's
to
like
those,
so
I was like,
bougie.
wow.
Oh, like big bread. I'm sorry.
Big
I think
bread.
of like ripped up pieces of white bread, and I'm like, that's horrifying. Okay.
No, this would be like a nice, big, like, round, crusty loaf of bread that's been all ripped up into pieces, into little,
Seems
maybe
so
1-inch squares or something. It was nice. Yeah.
Okay.
And then
take your word for
some
it.
would do. Almost all the churches I went to did grape juice instead of wine. Again, the wine tended to be more like Catholic and Lutheran.
I do remember being
wine.
a child going to a Catholic service and being horrified when everyone was drinking off the same cup.
Yes, it is a weird thing. Yeah.
That really sticks out in my mind.
I'm sorry, post-COVID, that's never
no way that's
going to
happen anymore.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so you get through the sermon,
and then offering, right?
Offering, all those things. Okay. There's usually a final prayer.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some prayers sprinkled throughout
prayer?
This whole time. Lots of prayers sprinkled throughout.
Praying all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. And then sometimes a final sing. Sometimes.
Okay.
Oh, really? See, we always had like the good send-off song. You got to pump people up. That's when you would sing like
sometimes
the real
we would pump
songs.
up. Sometimes I don't remember. I don't know if we would always do a final sing, but okay. So this has now been like a 2-hour ordeal.
Yeah.
Now it's time for Sunday school.
Hold on. Can I recap? So
what?
So you had 1 hour of sit around and wait beforehand.
Yes.
And then your actual service was like 1 hour, though.
I think closer to at least an hour and a half.
Okay. That's what I found. My churches I went to varied between an hour and a half for the actual service. Okay.
Yes.
Gracious.
Yeah. Then we have Sunday school. Sunday school lasts at least an hour.
Okay, so this is why it's a 3 freaking hour ordeal.
Okay.
So then Sunday school is split by grade, so you just go to whatever Sunday school classroom corresponds with your grade. And this was usually my favorite part of church because up until I was in about 6th or 7th grade, Sunday school was awesome because it was just like, let's sit around and do crafts and talk about the Bible.
Always
almost like this show,
That's true.
But with more crafts.
But with more crafts and snacks and less beer.
We don't do crafts, but we might if we were interested in that.
Yeah, but when you're a child, it's just as good, right?
Okay.
So, and it's hanging out with your friends at the same age.
Yeah.
Like, Sunday school was pretty awesome.
Toads.
If you're an adult, there's also Sunday school. You go to adult Sunday school.
What?
Yes.
I thought that was just a kid thing.
No, adults also go to Sunday school.
Usually as an adult, you end up calling it Bible study or something else where I went.
There's a Bible study or like a certain, like the discipleship class or the like Bible, whatever, they usually did or the women's class. Like they would always have a bunch of different classes
why do they have to separate the men and the women?
They don't have to. It's not like strict or compulsory, but they often will offer specialized the men's Bible study or the women's Bible study.
Yeah. There's even some churches where they'll have specific Bible studies for newlyweds or for parents or, sometimes there's all sorts of different topics you could kind of specialize in for your...
Okay.
Basically, it's like trying to find a group of your peers to study with. And so it depends how the church breaks up what those categories are.
I think that's a good.
Yeah.
I will say I was excited when I was finally old enough, like enough of a teenager to start going to adult Sunday school classes and adult Bible studies. I felt so adult and so cool and so mature. And
yeah, you are.
And everyone was so into me being there because they were just like so impressed with the young people who can be mature and like come to adult Bible study. Like I love that.
You're so mature.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It was like, I think mostly because it also meant that I didn't have to go to youth group anymore because when you're a teenager, then you're going to like the teenage youth groupish Sunday school, and that was not fun for me.
It tends to be a little more sort of rowdy, high energy, and if that's not your style, then Bible study
mine was mostly just
fun.
cliquish. It was mostly cliquish.
Okay.
And I didn't like that.
Yeah, I could see that.
So now you get to the end of that, and then church is over, right? Now, if you're lucky, you go to brunch.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
With your family or a church brunch?
With your family and maybe some other families.
Okay, got it.
Like with your family and like a couple of your friends' families. If you're lucky, you go to like the Greasy Spoon Diner and like have brunch.
Oh, yeah.
If you're really lucky, you get to go to your best friend's house and hang out at your best friend's house until we come back to church again that evening for evening church.
Yeah, you did both.
What?
Wow.
What?
Wow.
Yeah.
Why would you do both?
I don't know. Thinking about it now, I'm just like, why would you do both?
I don't know.
Now, to me, honestly, evening church was a total mystery to me because, to be fair, it was not as well attended as daytime church. Like, the service would be held in the fellowship hall, which was a much, much smaller space than the main sanctuary. So probably like a fraction of people are coming back for evening church. And all us kids, there was really nothing for us to do during evening church. Sometimes our church and some churches have kind of like a knockoff of the Boy Scouts. We had a Boy Scout knockoff called Caravan, and so sometimes when that was in season, kids would go to Caravan when the adults were at evening church, but like I was not in Caravan, and so like my friends and I would just run around the empty church building, which was so freaking fun.
Yeah,
while all the adults, this huge building, while all the adults were doing the serious adult stuff.
Yeah,
and that's your Sunday. Boy. Every Sunday.
Okay, so it's the whole freaking Sunday.
Yeah,
for sure.
But you get a nice break in the in-between where you get to play at your best friend's house sometimes.
Okay, well that sounds fun.
Now, if I didn't get to go to my best friend's house and I went back home, sometimes my parents would go to evening church, sometimes they wouldn't. But if they went, I would not go with them. Because again, there was nothing for me to do. So,
yeah.
Right. Wow. Okay, so I mean, we've done a great comprehensive coverage of what church is all about. I mean,
just my church. It's going to be different for all y'all out there who had very different church experiences.
Yeah, but that was pretty comprehensive.
That was mine, but I'm definitely curious to hear all y'all's experiences as well.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say like I said, mine varied a lot, but generally church service would last between an hour and a half. If I generally didn't like it when we would socialize afterward until I was old enough to appreciate coffee. And then after church was great because then you're there, having coffee cake and coffee and tea and stuff like that.
Coffee cake. Okay.
Coffee cake and coffee and, it was delightful.
Okay.
But no, the evening, my family has never done both a morning and evening service. There was a period when I was in high school when I went to church separate from my family, where I went to an evening service because I played in the band for an evening service that was specifically like the youth service. Mm-hmm. And so we had our service Sunday evenings. Like their daytime service was more traditional hymns and choir music. And then the evening service was all contemporary worship music. And I played in the band for that. And, had a crush on one of the girls who was also in the band and, the usual.
Yeah.
So that was fun. I think the thing I always really enjoyed was kind of like you said about getting to run around in the church, that church was kind of a place where I actually would sometimes get that kind of unsupervised time.
Yeah, that's the wild thing.
You're trusted a little more as a kid in a church.
Because it's like you're in the church, it's safe, it's fine. Yeah. Everyone around has their
You're fine, we're good. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
wow.
It's true. That's how you would get to do like makeouts and stuff, ironically.
What?
I mean, I never did any of those in church.
Yeah, neither did I, but I had some friends who did in church.
Cool.
Wow.
I got some light intimate side hugs from my boyfriends who came to church. That's the closest I could get.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
This was really interesting. Really interesting to hear about. And kind of similar to what I felt like I saw my friends doing once upon a time. Yeah. But
what do you remember seeing your friends doing?
Well, I just remember my friend James being really stoic in church and stoically taking his communion and then walking back and then just kind of sitting there and not really bored clearly, but just going through the motions. Right. But then, it wasn't that long. I think it was max an hour and a
Catholic
half or something.
Are so short.
It was bada bing, bada boom, we're out of there, which was great because then we would go to brunch or something afterwards and it was lovely. And he didn't go back.
Well, that was
CCD was a thing though, and I didn't deal with that crap, obviously.
Yeah, that's the thing is that what really made the difference between churches I went to that had really long services and ones that didn't was purely the length of the sermon. Mm-hmm. That sometimes that sermon's a good 30, 40 minutes. And, then everything else, and you end up with an hour and a half. Other times, it's the sermon is super short. And in the Catholic Church, basically non-existent. And that's why you get done so fast. It's you hit all the requirements, and then you're done. But sometimes you'd have that pastor who really
But then the catch was, though, if you went to a Catholic service and you're not raised Catholic, it's like someone threw you into
I didn't know what was
being
happening.
a background dancer at a music video, and they're just like, do it. And you're like,
I didn't know what was happening.
Oh, over here. Oh, okay, kneel. Okay, all right, stand up. Oh, and also with you.
We did have to get on the ground a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, we did have to get on the ground a lot, and I just kind of was like as always, I mean, I think that Jace has seen me do this. I'm always like, what? And then I like get, I stand up and I'm like, praise Jesus, yeah, or something, and like that's
you really have to be on your toes for sure.
Yeah, on your knees, on your toes.
Something I did find, when I went to Catholic churches specifically, like if friends were Catholic and I went to church with them, it was that like I don't know what to do. I don't know how to follow along with this. Whereas in the Protestant churches, even like in Lutheran churches, they tend to print out for you what you need to say in the bulletin.
Oh, that's nice.
That's friendly.
That's nice.
So you kind of see if there's a call and response, it's written there for you. Or better yet, some churches, they project it up on that screen like you were saying.
We would do some call and responses sometimes. Yeah, where that's projected up on the screen also.
So the first time I went to a church where they didn't print that out for me or project it on a screen, I was like, huh.
We just expected you to know.
Because it's like subtle wording differences at different churches. And you're like,
Yeah. It's a tough time.
Yeah, seriously.
Wow. Well, let's go to church sometime.
I don't know.
It'll
It's not going to be
post-pandemic project.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be interesting, and I'll try to follow along. That was fascinating. A deep dive into what Dedeker's church experience was like and a little bit of what Jace's was like. And I hope that all of you out there who have been to church and dealt with all of that remembered and kind of looked back on it maybe fondly with some nostalgia at the very least. Like, wow.
And if you had a totally different experience, post about it in the Drunk Bible Study Fans and Fellowship group on Facebook, because that would be interesting to see if someone had radically different experiences from what we did.
Probably. Yeah, probably it's out there. Alrighty, well, we will see you all next week for more Deutero Isaiah, and I am sincerely looking forward to it. See you then.